Can money buy happiness? I mean, it's a question we've all asked ourselves, right? But what if we looked for the answer in quantum physics? Yeah, I know it sounds a little out there, but today we're going to dive into a pretty amazing perspective that mashes up cutting-edge science with some really ancient wisdom to try and figure this out. So let's get into it.
So the big question is, what on earth can the study of tiny little particles and waves possibly tell us about a huge human feeling like happiness? It feels like a weird mashup, doesn't it? But trust me, it's the perfect place to start digging.
All right, so here's the thing. According to quantum physicist Minas Kafatos, the straight-up answer is, well, it's not what you'd expect. He says quantum mechanics has surprisingly little to say about it. He's super clear that we're talking about two totally different worlds here. And this really just nails the point. Science, especially physics, is amazing at describing how particles behave. But are those particles happy? Are they sad? Professor Kafatos basically says, I have no idea. Happiness, you see, is our thing. It's a human thing. But, and this is a huge but, quantum physics also teaches us this one profound idea. You can't separate the observer from the thing being observed. And that little fact changes everything. It kind of forces us to stop looking out there and start looking in here. And maybe even redefine what we're looking for in the first place.
And this is where the whole conversation takes a fascinating turn. Professor Kafatos suggests that maybe, just maybe, we've been asking the wrong question all along. Instead of chasing this thing we call happiness, which is always coming and going, he points us towards something way deeper, something much more solid.
And that something is a concept called ananda. It's a Sanskrit word, and it basically means bliss. Now, the key difference here, the real game changer, is that ananda isn't a feeling you get from something, like a new car or a promotion. No, it's a state of being that bubbles up from inside you. It's totally unconditional. Okay, let's break this down a little. Think about happiness as we usually know it. It totally depends on what's happening on the outside, right? It depends on things, on people. We literally say stuff like, you're making me so unhappy. But bliss? Bliss is a different animal altogether. It's that quiet, calm, internal feeling. You know the look on a Buddhist statue's face? That deep tranquility? That's what we're talking about. It doesn't need anyone or anything else to exist. Okay, so if the real goal is this internal bliss, what does that mean for one of the biggest things we all chase on the outside, money? Let's talk about the great money trap. So in our world today, this is pretty much seen as the ultimate jackpot, right? $1 trillion, the absolute peak of financial success. The story we're sold is that if you could just get this, all your problems would just melt away. But is that true? I mean, really, is piling up that much cash the actual secret to a life of deep meaning and fulfillment? Well, the evidence points to a big no. And here's the crazy irony. And this comes straight from Professor Kafatos himself. He says the people who get the money, they often end up unhappy because now they're terrified of losing it. So the very thing they were chasing becomes this new source of anxiety. The prize itself is a trap. And to show the complete opposite of that, Kafatos tells this incredible story. He once saw a man in India, totally barefoot, no possessions to his name, just walking down the street chanting. And he said this man was the absolute picture of total bliss. There was no money, no stuff involved at all. This guy was just in his own personal heaven. What a powerful image, right? Joy that has nothing to do with wealth. That story just perfectly sets up this ancient piece of wisdom. You cannot serve two masters. The path to finding yourself, to finding that real internal bliss, it's a totally different road than the one that's all about accumulating money. At some point, you kind of have to choose which master you're going to follow. All right, now let's do something a little different. Let's zoom out. I mean, way, way out. Because sometimes to really get a handle on our own little worries, we need to see the biggest picture possible. You know, we humans tend to think the whole universe revolves around us. But Mother Nature, she doesn't really play favorites. She cares for the bugs and the whales and the forests just as much as she cares for us. It kind of reminds me of what physics tells us, that deep down, everything is connected. We're just one small part of this giant cosmic experiment. And speaking of cosmic, just look at this number. That's a 1 with 24 zeros after it. $1 trillion. That's the estimated number of Earth-like planets out there. When you really let that sink in, doesn't it make our personal anxieties about money or status feel kind of tiny? It's humbling, but it's also incredibly freeing. And Earth's own history gives us that same kind of perspective. Think about it. 252 million years ago, the Permian extinction wiped out 90% of all species. Then you had the dinosaurs, right? They were the kings for millions of years. And then poof, they were gone. Great empires, entire species, they all disappear. The universe doesn't owe us survival. So the real question for us becomes, what are we going to do with our time here? Are we going to spend it chasing stuff? Or are we going to spend it caring for each other? So, if we can't find fulfillment in a pile of money, and if our place in the cosmos is, let's be honest, pretty small, where do we look? Well, the answer brings us right back to where we started, back inside our own minds. This is it. This is the main takeaway. Happiness or bliss, it's not a thing you can possess. It's not something you can buy or earn or hold in your hand. It all has to do with the state of your mind. Remember how the observer in quantum physics is tangled up with reality? It's like that. Your internal state is what literally creates your experience of the world. It's about the quality of your mind, not the quantity of your stuff. So what can you actually do? What's the path forward? It's actually pretty simple, but not easy. First, you got to start asking the right questions. Not how can I get more, but what truly brings me peace. Second, look to the great teachings, the wisdom that's been around for thousands of years. And third, well, this is the big one. You have to start that journey to find out who you really are underneath it all. And that really leaves us with one final thing to think about. We've seen that the deepest, most real joy has nothing to do with what's in our bank account. So the real question, for you and for me, is this. If your heaven isn't in your wallet, where are you going to find it?